Central West Tennessee Association of Realtors. I sound like Cleve Marsh this morning, don't I?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but
Thank you.
But you recovered nicely.
I did. That voice of real estate is Brent Ward, the CEO of CWTAR, and things going well still. Market's good.
Everything's going great. Things are just moving right along, and it was nice to actually see a little rain over the weekend because we need a little bit of it.
Yeah, not quite as bad as Olive Branch, Mississippi got.
No, there was a lot of areas that got a lot of rain, and we got a lot of rain in a short amount of time, considering.
We had a couple of hard downpours,
Yep.
Yeah, Olive Branch, I was talking to Eddie Holmes just a moment ago, and they had 8.5 inches in 6 hours.
That's crazy.
During the first, I guess it was Friday. Yeah.
Well, I think originally they were calling for like 5 or 6 here, but it just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller as it went along.
Yeah, it was all scattered all over the place.
It was, and we were at the Generals game Saturday night, fireworks night, and I guess about we were 2.5 innings in, and it started raining, and they finally ended up having to cover up the field. We started when it was raining. And they got out there and covered up the field, and then the sun came out, so they uncovered it, brought out dirt, and you could see this huge black cloud coming in, and they rushed out there and covered it up, and then the bottom fell out. They ended up calling it for the Sunday's game. They're going to do a doubleheader on Sunday.
That's a hard – anything that's outdoors like that is hard to predict, especially this time of the year.
Yep.
I worked for many, many years as track announcer at Jackson Dragway and Southeastern Motorsports, and, you get the crowd in there, and then there's one cloud – would come over and ruin the whole evening.
It just sits there. It's like it doesn't move. It's like, let's just hang out right here. Because that's the way it was Saturday night, because we were in a box upstairs, and we just kept looking at it, and we're just like, is this thing ever going to move? It's just like sitting here.
That's what they were doing, hanging out.
Hanging out, yeah.
Voice for Real Estate is a presentation to CWTAR, sponsored by Leaders Mortgage Services, Allstate Insurance, NG Houghton Hughes, the agent, Pete Dubuisson with National Property Inspections, and Bird and Bird Attorneys. And you have a special guest with us today. I know this young man from somewhere.
Yeah, I kind of figured you might. Yeah, I got a special guest with me. I have Mr. Clint Dorris with us this morning. Clint, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank y'all for having me on today.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So Clint is one of our local and no offense against anybody, but younger appraisers that we have out there. And
the truth hurts.
It does. I mean, it is what it is. He's younger than me. So, with Dorris Appraisals, and he's been around for a while, and he kind of like me, he came in on the background. So of your dad, who's been doing this for, I'm assuming, a pretty good amount of time.
I'd say he has been doing it probably pushing 30, 40 years.
Yep.
As a younger guy, I'd say I'm pushing 20 years myself.
Wow.
There you go.
Oh, man, you're making me feel real old now.
But I've been doing it about 20 years now.
Well, you're just a couple years behind me as far as real estate. I got about 22 years in the real estate world, so you're just right behind me. Jimmy over here.
Finishing up 36.
There you go, right there. So we appreciate you being here this morning, Clint, and we got a lot of questions and stuff I want to talk about this morning, because this comes up a lot with our list of sponsors for the show. We kind of nail it on all kinds of different levels as far as the home buying process. But the one thing that we've never been able to cover, but it gets mentioned a lot, is how the appraisal fits into the process.
Sure. So I love real estate, and I love talking about real estate. So thank you for having me on to talk about it. The appraisal sometimes may get confused with the inspection. Yeah. But, the inspector is there to see what is wrong with the house, what kind of problems you may have. I'm the guy that says, what is the house worth? So the bank calls me. Typically, if you're going to get a loan, the bank is going to call and they're going to order an appraisal, because they're going to give you a loan based on the value of the house, and they're going to ask me to tell them the value of the house. Now, I do some work for individuals, people paying cash, sometimes for estates, but generally buying a home, if you're using a bank, I'm coming in to tell the bank what the house is worth. And I'm not necessarily looking at the electrical. I'm not looking at the plumbing. If I see anything blatantly wrong, I report that, but I'm not going to crawl under the house or check your air conditioning.
That's what I was getting ready to ask. I was going to say, okay, so you're both out at the property, and I think this is where it gets confusing to the buyer, is they know there's two people going out to the property, and they're both coming back with a report, right? One of which they don't really have any control over. And real quick before I get to that's kind of changed a little bit over the years, because I know when I got into the business, we had a stable of appraisers that we liked to use because we knew they were good, and they'd been doing it, and but that's changed over the years. Tell us how that's changed, because the buyer really does not have a choice in that anymore, the way it works, right?
In general, they do not. generally the banks are going to rotate between appraisers because they want to keep a separation between the loan officer and the appraiser. Now, that's not necessarily necessary in my opinion, but it's the facts.
Yep.
So the bank is going to rotate appraisers where they used to maybe select them. That being said, most of the banks still have the best appraisers on their list. So in general, you're going to get a good appraiser who's experienced to come out, particularly if you're working with a local bank. But they're going to call us out, and we're going to go do the appraisal, or one of the other guys may. But essentially, you don't necessarily get a choice in that. You can ask, but the bank may tell you no.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so it's a little bit different than it was. So back to what we were talking about. So you got two people coming out to the house. You got two reports coming back. One they get to choose, one they kind of don't. And so that's where they get confused, because you're both coming back with a report, but you hit on something that was really important, and that was the value, because that's something I think a lot of people don't realize, because even as a realtor, now I can come out and I can tell you what I think your property should sell for, a price range, but I'm not giving you a value, because technically by law I'm not allowed to give you a value on that property.
Sure. And so an appraisal, the definition of an appraisal is an opinion of value.
Okay.
Value actually is what the buyer and seller agree to, and then I give my opinion of value so that that bank knows it's believable. Now, where it comes in the process is if the inspector comes out and there's a hole in the roof, you may not buy the property. But if you've agreed to pay $200,000 for a house, and my opinion says it's $150,000, you're also going to have an issue with the bank there. Now, you can come out of your pocket with that own money, but the bank's not going to loan you on a house you're buying for $200,000 that is really only worth $150,000. So there's almost a protective layer there, in that we're trying to prevent you, or prevent the bank from making a loan on, or you from buying a house for more money than it's worth. So we're really a protective layer. I know a lot of people may get mad at the appraiser, but they're really there to help you in a sense.
They are, and that's not, if things are priced correctly and people just haven't lost their minds as far as pricing on their houses, that doesn't happen a lot. That's not like a common thing that you're going to go out and do an appraisal on a house and come back and it doesn't. I mean, it does happen, but it's not like a common thing.
It happens several times a year. And I'm talking about out of hundreds and maybe even 1,000 appraisals.
Right.
So
Yeah.
It doesn't happen a whole lot. The thing is, and I've never personally sold real estate as a realtor, but they tell me it's hard to sell a house for more than it's worth. Because we as the appraiser, if you're a buyer, you're doing your due diligence, you're using a realtor, you're going through a local bank, your buyer is going to see that they could get a better deal somewhere else. So it's hard to sell a house for a whole lot more than it's actually worth. And so appraisals tend to work out because they're just a reflection of what's really going on in the market.
That's right. Yeah, and that's why it's so important, and I talk about it all the time about, if you're selling your property, to use a realtor that can come out and help you with that pricing structure, because there's a lot of conflicting information out there when buyers get ready to sell on what they think their property might be worth. And I used to find it funny, because when I would go meet a lot of times with a lot of sellers, they say, well, my neighbor down the street got this, and my neighbor down the street got this, and this is how much they sold their house for. Of course, naturally, I go right back to the office, pull up the tax information on these properties, and none of them are what they're supposed to be, because nobody ever exaggerates. And it's not that my sellers were exaggerating; it was the neighbors that were exaggerating on what they actually were able to get for their property.
Sure.
And it makes it a little difficult. And then that's where you come in with the actual estimated value of what you think it's worth. But if the realtor and the bank are doing their part, then everybody should be in alignment.
Yeah, and so a lot of people will say, oh, well, I may not need a realtor, or I may not need to do all this. They think they know real estate. And some people, there's very few people, and they actually do. They really know real estate. They really know their neighborhood. There's some people that can fix their own plumbing, but I wouldn't fix my own plumbing. And
Me neither.
When we go to research what these houses are selling for, we're pulling up the deeds. We're going to the courthouse. We're talking to the realtors. Hey, did that $200,000 include the furniture? Did you buy a boat with that property? You've got to really know what the price is. And so we're kind of there to just reflect that. And I think it provides a real service in the market.
So, okay. So we actually had a text question here a little bit from a friend of mine. So they wanted to know, as far as like your opinion when it comes to the online websites that like to offer their own online estimates, and we'll just say that I don't typically like to use any online site names, but what's your thoughts on those?
They're a useful tool. They're not an appraisal. They're not set in stone. They are drawing, typically it seems to me, from the public records. Sometimes that's the same public records I know about. But if you sold your house with that furniture for $20,000 extra, does that online site know that that furniture was included in the sale? Those sites can be an effective tool, particularly in what I like to say, not for a bad term, but a cookie cutter neighborhood.
Right.
They can be an effective tool. They're great to look at. And I know people who can really use them. It's really empowered the public. However, I've seen houses where they don't pick up that that house is actually on the golf course, and it's worth $100,000 more than the one next door. They don't always know what went on. They pick up on transfers that may have been from a brother to a sister. And so they can just be very inaccurate. They're a great tool, but don't buy a house depending on that alone.
Gotcha. And that brings up an important point that no matter what happens, the online search engines, the online where they give you an estimate on your property, will never take the place of somebody actually setting foot on that property to see what's actually there.
The online person has never looked at the kitchen.
That's right.
They've never set out and looked at the pool. They've never felt the grass. They've never even probably looked at the neighbor that much. So the online thing is a tool, it's a paper, it's a rule of thumb, it's a starting point. But they've never stepped in that kitchen or looked at that outbuilding or heard the stereo in the house. They've never felt the emotional. And real estate, particularly houses, it's not all just numbers. There's an emotion involved in that also.
That's really the key factor that as realtors that we talk about all the time. Whenever we go out to list a property and we're talking to the sellers, and they've been on one of the search engine sites and they've looked up to see what the estimate of their property might be, and and that's the one thing that we talk about is that no matter what you do on the other end, if there's not a human that can go in this house and physically look at it, feel it, hear it, whatever the case may be, in some cases smell it, and to know whether or not that this property is worth what they say it's worth. And a lot of times you have to read the disclosures on that, because a lot of them will say that they could be anywhere from 7 to 10% off one way or the other on their estimates, because they're strictly numbers based. That's it, nothing else, just numbers.
They're numbers, and I just think a person is valuable. The numbers are good. As a matter of fact, and I don't know if I've even said this out loud, everybody else is using those and looking at them. You probably should take a look at them, because you're going to be at a disadvantage in the market if you don't. But you also need to talk about a local. Jimmy has been in more houses and more commercial pieces of property than anybody else has. And I know people say, I don't need a realtor, I don't need an appraisal. Well, you've been looking at a house for 6 months. I've been doing 500 a year for 10, 20 years. So a realtor and an appraiser has a lot of experience that you may not think they have. I mean, we're analyzing 6, 8, 10 deals a day, and that's valuable. And if it costs you $300, $400, $500 to get that, and it saves you $10,000 to $20,000, why not do that?
Yep. Oh yeah, that's perfect right there. There's only been one time that I can think of in my years of doing it, and I'm sure other realtors have been doing it longer than I did. I had a lady that bought a house on a ruled, it was a disaster relief loan, okay? And she had never owned a property before, so that put her in another category. She'd always rented. She'd never had a property in her name, so when her apartment got destroyed from the tornadoes that came through, she qualified for this special loan that was literally 0% interest, like nothing, okay? And so we found the house. Let me take that back. She found the house she wanted, even though I advised strongly against it, because it was not the house she told me she wanted. It wasn't in an area she wanted to be in. And she actually fell in love with the story that went behind the house, and the two people that owned it is what she fell in love with. And I tried to explain that as nicely as I could, but I guess I couldn't verbalize it correctly. And she went ahead and bought it anyways. And I'll never forget when we closed the attorney's office, there was 6 pieces of paper. That was it. In her loan package, there was 6 pieces of paper. They did no appraisal. Okay, she didn't want to do a home inspection, and she bought it. And even the attorney that closed it was like, well, you'll never sell this house at a 0% interest,
right?
Because you're not paying any extra money back. I mean, you're literally paying for the house. Every payment you make goes straight to the principal. And she sold it 2 years later.
Wow.
Well, I had those 0% deals are great. Foreclosures for the right buyer can be a great deal, but there are some houses, and I used to have an Uncle George who was in real estate, and he said, there's some houses you can't give me. Some houses will cost you money, and houses are not a thing to be played with.
No.
If you're broke, you don't need a house. Houses are serious business. You need a realtor. You need a professional because you can get saddled with a literal, I hate the term, but you can get a money pit
Yeah.
that costs you
Yeah.
more and that you can never get out of. You can get a house that you cannot fix up and still get your money out of it. And so it's important to talk to people. It's not a game. It's not go to whatever.com and look it up and buy the house because, hey, everybody's doing it. Real estate is actually, it's a serious deal.
I know you've had some situations that I have run into over the years, and you go take a new house or relatively new house where the people are just so proud of what they have built, and you go in there and you're in a typical subdivision that's 3-4 bedroom houses, and this guy says, well, it's just me and my wife, we built a 2-bedroom house.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just so proud of it. You hate to tell them that, you know, you may not be so happy about this when you try to sell it, but that's one of the things we run into from time to time.
And this is a lot like the guy who fixes his own plumbing. I know you're proud of it. We all love our house, even as an appraiser or a builder. I like my house. I see the regular market do it, but I do it myself. But this person who builds their own house, they need to know their market, that people aren't going to buy your 2-bedroom house when the neighborhood's full of kids.
Yeah.
And I'll go in a house and people will say, hey, well, you know, look at this. I designed it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, it kind
I
of shows a
can
little bit
tell.
too, you know.
Where does this hallway go?
Exactly.
I was just getting ready to ask you about that because I have seen a ton of those over the years. You know, they come every once in a while where you'll get somebody that's built this really awesome, totally that was built specifically for them, right?
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, 7-8 years later, now we need to sell it.
Yeah.
And it's funny how it doesn't seem to fit anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, it's strange. We've done many over the years for divorce cases.
Sure.
And those I don't like doing them, but they got to be done, right? But it's amazing. You can walk through that house with the wife and then walk through it again with the husband, and you think you're in 2 different houses.
I had the misfortune of going through one with the husband and the wife
Oh,
both there
man.
at the same time, and it was like the angel and the devil on your shoulder. One was pointing out every fault in the house, the other one
Yep.
was talking about how great it is.
Yep.
And I kind of needed them to just have their fight elsewhere so I could do my job.
Yeah. Have you had a situation where the owner is very, very proud of something they've done to the house and they have way overspent what they should have done? And I mean, again, sometimes you have to be not only an appraiser but a psychologist to know exactly how to say what you want to say.
Yes. And
Yeah.
when I'm there for the bank, I mean, I'm telling funny stories now, but I'm there in a neutral role.
Yeah, we
I'm
have
not
to be.
there for the
You have to
bank.
be.
I'm not on the bank side, I'm not on the buyer's side, and I'm not on the seller's
On
side.
paper, it says the appraiser is the advocate of the property.
Yes,
Not
I'm
of either
there
side.
for the value only. But I do see those things, and you know, doing appraisals is fun, but it's sad too. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
houses aren't a joke, and so people are in there and they're very proud of their. You can't get a house with this pink wall and this certain kind of wood, and I'm thinking, well, there's a reason for
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
But in general, now I can be hired individually, but if I'm there for the bank, I mind my business. I
Yep.
just keep it to myself. But
Yep.
sure, you run into that a lot, and of course, everybody's proud of their home. You know, we all love our homes in
Sure.
general.
Sure.
Actually, that was a great lead-in, Jimmy, into another question that I had for him today, which is one of the main reasons why I wanted Clint to come on the show today, was to talk about doing upgrades to your property.
Yep.
And, you know, how does that work exactly? Because we've talked about it a little bit on here, talking about return on investment. So you hear us say ROI, that's what we're talking about, return on investment. But, you know, you go out there and you put $35,000, $40,000 into a kitchen, which is probably not uncommon, I
Sure.
would assume. How much of that, or how does that work exactly, Mike? How much are you talking about maybe getting back out of that again?
This is one of the reasons you actually need a professional, because that answer may be different in this market where prices go up a little but not really. Or if you're in Franklin, Tennessee, where prices are going up like crazy,
Yeah.
you may see different things happen. But there's different kinds of improvements, and they all have different answers. So in general, fixing up your kitchen, you will probably get your money back and maybe a little bit more if your kitchen needs fixing. Now, there's some houses you can't really improve better. You can't make a new house any better. And if your house is fine in a neighborhood, adding on space may add value, but you don't want to overbuild your neighborhood, because if you're in a $100,000 neighborhood and you add $75,000 worth of space, your next buyer is probably just going to go to the $175,000 neighborhood. They don't need a $200,000 house in a $100,000 neighborhood.
Right.
So it all depends, but kitchens can help. There's other items that you have to improve, but that don't necessarily help your value, but they prevent you from losing value. So we expect the air conditioning to work. You don't spend $5,000 on an air conditioning and your house go up $5,000 in value. But if you don't fix your air conditioner, it may go down $15,000.
Yeah.
So air conditioners, roofs, driveways, there's a baseline that you have to spend to improve just to keep up the maintenance. Then there's another group of things that I would say optional. So a lot of people say a pool adds value. A lot of people say it doesn't. It adds value, but it only adds value to that 30 to 40% of people who actually want a pool. The elderly, those with infants, they'll just avoid the house with the pool. Same thing for shops. So things like pools and shops that are optional that not everybody wants, you may only get 50 cents on the dollar back. So you spend $40,000 on a shop, you may only gain $20,000 of value there. So there's things that improve it, like kitchens, like updates. If your house is out of date, you can probably get your money back by updating it. But just adding things for fun doesn't necessarily get you your money back. And then there's the necessities that you definitely have to fix.
All right, perfect. That sounds like a good spot to take a break there real quick, Jimmy. So you want to talk about our sponsors there real quick?
We're talking about, professionals and needing a realtor, needing an appraiser, but you also need some other things when you're looking at buying or selling a house. Number one on the list is going to be a mortgage for most people. And
that'd be a good place to start.
Yes, it'd be a real good place. In fact, that's a good place to start before you start looking at houses. Get out there and get your money worked out first, so how much. Don't go to a $250 neighborhood if you know you can only afford $100,000.
Yeah,
so
very sad. Very
and
sad.
Leaders Mortgage Services can help you with that, and they can also help you negotiate the maze of all the kinds of financing that are out there now. Everybody's familiar with conventional FHA, VA, but there's Tennessee Housing. There's the zero interest rate loans that we've talked about. The professionals at Leaders Mortgage Services are there for that reason. They can get you the best deal for you. It's not a cookie cutter thing. Everybody needs something a little bit different. So go by and see them. 215-6678. They're located at 36 Stonebridge. Then once you've made the deal and you're ready to close, you're going to have that thing insured. You want it insured. The bank's going to insist on their interest being insured. So Allstate Insurance are the people that you need to talk to. Angie Hooten Hughes. Not only can she take care of your homeowner's insurance, she can bundle everything, your car, your life insurance, your homeowners, save you a little money, save you a lot of time. Give her a call at 901-373-6060. And then, of course, we talk about Pete Dubuisson with National Property Inspections. Property inspections are a must these days, I think, in most cases. And just something that a lot of people want to do prior to putting their house on the market. They want to make sure that everything's right before the realtor looks at it, before the appraiser looks at it. So call Pete. It's 467-6250, and that is National Property Inspections. And then, of course, probably the last guy you'll see before they hand you the keys is your attorney.
That's usually a good day.
Bird Attorney's been in business since 1985 in this market. They handle all aspects of the real estate transaction, everything from title searches to zoning and deed restrictions. Bird & Bird at 424-7188. Our sponsors for The Voice for Real Estate.
All right, Jimmy, appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
All right, if you're just tuning in with us, I have Mr. Clint Dorris here with us this morning with Dorris Appraisals. Been around for quite a while here in Jackson. Know his dad very well as well, too, Mr. Bruce Dorris. And so Clint's here with us today to talk about how the appraisal fits into the whole entire real estate buying process. And we've covered a lot so far, and when we left off a few minutes ago, we were talking about return on investment and how some upgrades can change the value of your property. And so we had just gotten into that, and he was talking about how different markets could change possibly, because you can go online and probably pull up a national average of what something is going to, how much something is going to change your property. And but it may vary depending on where your property is located.
It may, and this sort of dovetails with the conversation that we had earlier. About these online services, that online service doesn't know what you put into your kitchen. Mm-hmm. So maybe your neighbor did get that amount of money, but he might have had a great pool in an outdoor area. So, these things you do, you need to know where you're spending your money and what you're going to get out of it. And I really think you need to be talking to a realtor or an appraiser. Now, if you have all the money in the world and you don't have a bank loan and you want to make your house just the way you want it, then spend all that money on those great things and keep it and know it's yours.
Yeah.
But if you ever may possibly want to sell, and I know people say, we're never selling. This is our forever house. You know? Those are the people that sell within a year, usually.
That's the guy that's in his third forever house.
Right? Probably his third forever wife, too.
Oh, no. I think we're off track.
Now we need the attorney again.
Yeah, we need to get Charles back. So you actually hit on something that was really important. When my father and I used to work together, we had a seller and buyer who was a retired contractor that had moved down here, and in every house that he bought, he was actually my dad's customer, but I knew him really well too. But every house that he bought, the first thing he did when he moved in was like change everything. Right. New flooring, repainted. A lot of times would redo the kitchens completely from ground up. And so my dad asked him about that one time, like, why do you do that? Because he never stayed in the house longer than a couple of years, and then he'd sell it and move on. He said, because I want the house to look like I want it so I can enjoy it while I'm living here. Mm-hmm. And so when my dad asked him about, well, you're going to sell it again in a couple of years, you possibly can't expect to get all this money back. And he said, I don't. He said, I'm doing this for me. And he goes, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to be able to sell it for 2 years from now. I'm doing this for me. And if I can get a quarter, 25% of my investment back when I go to sell it, I'm okay with that because I did this for me. Yes. And I think that gets lost a lot when people are doing home improvements on their property is they start thinking about, well, what is my ROI on it? And they leave out the human factor of, am I going to enjoy what I'm doing to my property right now?
And if you're in the situation of your dad's friend, then that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Do it, enjoy it. In general, on your house, you need to do it for you. Jackson is a market where things aren't going crazy. There's really nothing you're going to do to your house and make it worth $100,000 more. No. And anything that makes it worth more might just be the market going up a little bit. But you need to enjoy your house. And that's why you need a good realtor, you need a good loan company, you need a good attorney so that you can have this house the way you like it and not have these stresses that go along. If you buy the house right and you're in it right, then spend it and make the way you want it to be. Love your home. That's what I want you to do. But don't spend crazy money that you don't have.
Yep. And don't go in expecting to make money in a lot of cases.
Right. That's kind of my thoughts on it is sometimes you're just doing it because you want to do it.
Yeah.
But you mentioned over improving for a neighborhood. We had a house that we went to go list one time that was absolutely gorgeous, big house, probably 4,000 square feet. I mean, nice house. And but it only had a 2-car garage on it. The house had like 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, all these extra rooms, windows that opened up to the downstairs, interior wise, 2 stairs. I mean, it's a beautiful house, but a 2-car garage, right? And when we went to list it, of course, the owner wanted like way up here, and when we pulled our comps, we're just like, the problem was that he had put, I don't know, $35,000 into the yard because he had 1 acre lot, and he'd had the whole entire yard bulldozed, sapling trees cut down, and it resodded it with zoysia sod. The entire yard had sand and everything brought in. He had the prettiest grass you've ever seen in your life. It was kind of interesting watching my dad try to explain to him that, the thing is every house has a yard.
Right.
So
the fancy appraisal term for a house like that is functional obsolescence.
There you go.
There you go.
And those things you actually do want to fix if possible. Sometimes you can't. The house is too old, but real old houses didn't have closets. Of course, we all expect closets today. Not that old houses may only have 1 bathroom. Most people want 2 bathrooms today. And when you get in a certain price range, people want a 3-car garage instead of a 2-car garage. Exactly. And some of those things you can fix, and some of them you can't.
Yeah, well, that would definitely be one of them because as we tried to tell him, a secondary garage would have been more practical if you're thinking about trying to get your money back. That would have been a more practical thing to do. But so moving into it, we talked a little bit about how on appraisals, those typically come from the bank versus or the buyer getting to choose. But there are cases when somebody can just pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, I need an appraisal done. Can you come out and do it?
So I've got 2 of those situations this week. I've got one where a person's paying cash for a house. Now, I was telling you that these banks use this rotating system, but the cash for the house came from a realtor. A realtor's got a buyer. He's one of these people. He's got the cash.
Yeah.
But he wants to spend the $400 with me on an appraisal to make sure that his $150,000 house, that he's not overpaying $10,000 or $20,000. So individuals do call me for appraisals. Sometimes people have inherited a home, and they're getting along well with their sister and the brother, but they still need an appraisal to determine what to pay each other. Or Mama wants to stay in the house, but I've got to divide the money between Mama's sisters and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So there are needs for an appraisal, or maybe you're the one looking at that house and you're just not sure about it. You can hire an appraiser and just make sure that your money is going where it needs to be going.
Absolutely.
So I have one question for you, because this has been brought up to me in the past, and so I'm just going to. So if you're going out to do an appraisal for a bank and or an individual, or I don't know, maybe you're going out because the house is being foreclosed or something, is there any difference in those, or will they always pretty much come back the same all the time?
In general, the opinion of value is the opinion of value.
Okay.
You mentioned foreclosure. There are some circumstances where an investor's opinion of value may be different than a homeowner's opinion of value.
Gotcha.
Generally, a house is worth what it's worth to the market. And so people say, oh, well, I'm just doing this for a refinance. Well, your house in Evergreen is still worth what a house in Evergreen is worth. But there are some situations where a house may need total repairs, and an investment value and a market value could be slightly different, but that's not always the case. And generally, the house is worth what it's worth to me, to you, or anybody else. The value is typically the value in general.
All right. Well, Clint, I think we've run out of time here, but I certainly appreciate you being on the show for us today.
I appreciate you having me on. I love talking real estate. I've loved doing this, so thank you to both of you. I think a lot of both of you.
Hey, you got a phone number there that you could give somebody in case they need to get in touch with you?
So our office number at Dorris Appraisals is 731-664-7371. We have 4 appraisers in there: Bruce, who you mentioned earlier, Kathy Coleman, Nikki Ward, and myself. And we've got a full office that can take care of you anytime. And you can check me out at clintdorris.com also.
All right, Clint, we certainly appreciate you coming on the show for us today.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Clint. Always good to see you. Tell Bruce hi from me, and we'll see him maybe on the golf course sometime soon.
Good to see you. Thank you.
You too, bud. You too. Don't forget, this conversation is also available on the on Facebook, on the CWTAR Facebook page. Just go in there and click on Facebook Live. Our thanks to Paul Schulze, as always.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate
the man behind the curtain over there. Paul, give us a hand before we go today. One hand only. Thank you very much. There it is. Paul Schulze with Worthy Road Studios takes care of all of our Facebook and internet connections for us, and we appreciate what he does on a regular basis. See you next week about this time.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jimmy. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much. The presentation of CWTAR, Central West Tennessee Association of Realtors, the voice for real estate with Brent Ward.